Firstly, Luis Alvaro Martinez, President of the European Youth Forum. Antonio Tajani, President of the European Parliament. Emma Marcegaglia, President of Business Europe. Jüri Ratas, Prime Minister of Estonia. Luca Visentini, President of the European Trade Union Confederation. And finally, Daya Isaksson, a member of the Swedish Prime Minister's National Innovation Council and member of the government's Digital Advisory Board. So, let me now immediately join you here on stage. As I think you have already noticed and will certainly notice throughout the day, is much of the focus of the discussion will be on youth, on the prospects for youth, future generations. So it's absolutely suitable that we start this morning the discussion with Luis Alvaro Martinez. I already said he's president of the European Youth Forum. Now, I reiterate what I said before, that all speakers are expected to stick to their time limit, which is 3 minutes. And Luis, I'm counting on you to set a good example. Over to you. There you go.
Thank you, Anne. Excellencies, friends, as the first pro-European generation by birth, we are still willing to support the European project. But for how long? With 1 in 5 young people at risk of poverty and social exclusion, youth unemployment rates struggling to decrease, cuts in national budgets for education, and pensions becoming a dream for my generation, it is no surprise that a whole generation's trust in Europe is starting to shake. Somewhere along the way, we lost touch with the reality of people's lives, undermining the foundations upon which this union should stand: equality, social inclusion, and respect for human dignity. We hear too often from you guys that young people are the future, that Europe has our backs, and yet, can we count on Europe when so little is being done to support us? But the good thing is that we can turn this around. Young people want to drive the building of a better union, but we have to be given the means to do so. Through access to quality education and quality employment, through access to services and benefits on an unconditional basis. But this requires stronger political will, better investments, and more coherent policies. And yes, this means investing more in the Youth Employment Initiative, and yes, this means investing 10 times more in the Erasmus Plus program. Thanks to Prime Minister Löfven and President Juncker, the Social Summit is a historic turning point. It's an opportunity to show that our union is willing to put citizens back at the heart of the project. It must not be a wasted opportunity. You must prioritize young people's #1 concern, tackling inequalities. You must prioritize the social Europe, a social Europe which is forward-looking, people-centered, and youth-friendly. Together, we can make this happen, and we can youth up Europe. Today's European of Social Rights is a pledge for social Europe that no one can overturn. Its implementation will be a test that we cannot afford to fail. The future where quality and inclusive education and lifelong learning are guaranteed, where all young people can learn, move and exchange in schools, universities and youth organizations without any barriers. A future where we're not forced to decide between our career and our families and any other personal choices, where work-life balance ensures a positive impact for all those Europeans torn between the EU they want and the EU that they can actually afford. Our economy is changing fast, yes, and it requires all of us to adapt. But Europe must not leave anyone behind. We're expected to be flexible and embrace new forms of work, but with no protection to tackle these challenges. Europe needs to raise the bar when it comes to social protection and end the precarious situation of young people. We cannot afford the cost of a sacrificed generation. And I finish. Dear leaders, our more social Europe, a youth-centered Europe, is the only viable antidote to anti-European, populist and extremist movements. We must work towards truly systemic change that everybody can contribute to, but also benefit from. This is how we will build sustainable and resilient societies. Young people will not allow nor understand more Europe without a social Europe. So let's do this by putting young people at the core. Let's youth up Europe and this social pillar, and let's make history, but together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Luis, for this very forceful call to not only talk about youth, but really with youth about what their concerns are. And I think it was absolutely suitable that we started off with you today. So thank you so much. I would now like to turn my attention to Antonio Tajani, the President of the European Parliament. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. The European Parliament is strongly engaged on this social pillar. The European Parliament approved a lot of rules. The last vote on anti-dumping rules is very important also for the social pillar, because for the first time inside our rules there is also the social dumping. It's a strong message to the workers, to our citizens, also to the other countries. It's important also for our trade policy. The second point are the new rules pour les travailleurs détachés, sujet très important, pas seulement en France.
On posted workers, that's a very important topic, not just in France, but throughout the European Union. We've put out a very strong message there.
The resolution in favor of the social pillar. But the most important point is the implementation of the social pillar. For this, we need to look at the future through the next European budget. I am totally in favor of a political budget. If the youth unemployment, the industrial policy, the social pillar is one of the most important targets with immigration and terrorism, we need to have a strategy. We need to invest more in education, research, innovation. Digitalization too, because without the industrial revolution it's impossible to have more jobs in Europe. For this we need to strengthen the industries, the small and medium-sized companies, we need to strengthen the internal market, we need to work for the digitalization, we need to strengthen the real economy, also agriculture. It's very, very, very important for us, but my point of view, it's important also to have better rules on the competition. There are good rules at competition at European level, but we need also to strengthen the competition of the European companies in the world during the globalization. For this we need also to look at global competition. For this we need to work a lot. More money for education, more money for digitalization, also for education for not only youth entrepreneurs, not only for youth people, but also for the workers. It's not easy if you want to change the companies to have workers 40 years, 50 years old without a good education on the digitalization. For this we need to invest also in the workers. In my opinion, this is the real social policy. We need to strengthen really the workers. If we want to work for more jobs, we need to strengthen the real economy through the next European budget. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for a very timely reminder that, of course, we need to put our money where our mouth is. So I think that's very good that you brought this into the discussion. Thank you so much, President Tajani. Let me now call on Jüri Ratas, Prime Minister of Estonia, who will speak on behalf of the Council presidency. But before I hand over, let me say that you have done so much to advance digitalization and also have had a great emphasis on the future of work. So it's wonderful you can be with us. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, dear colleagues, social partners, ladies and gentlemen. Stefan, first of all, thank you for your hospitality here. We had an inspiring talks, I think, in Tallinn during the Digital Summit and the Social Summit in Brussels. A month ago we kicked up an open discussion with the social partners on the future of economic and social dimension of the European Union. I'm glad really to be here today to continue exploring the breaking issues facing our labour markets in the digital revolution. As we agreed in Rome, embracing new technologies are essential to ensuring a prosperous and sustainable future for all our citizens. After all, the application on new technologies like artificial intelligence, connected devices and robotics is a game changer that has potential to revolutionize our economies and also businesses. McKinsey Global Institute study has found that almost half of work activities globally have the potential to be automated using correct technology. These technologies are also challenging our traditional understanding of the world of work. Some jobs fall by the wayside by digitalization has the potential to open the door to new, more fulfilling jobs and forms of work. The flexibility in new forms of work has created unique opportunities for Europeans to be in charge on their own working lives. Our legislation shouldn't become an obstacle when developing those new ways of life. For example, Taxify and Uber has run into a host of potential and regulatory troubles in many European cities. Estonia not stopped to offer these new types of services. I believe Europe should be a leader of innovation and to open to new progressive solutions. Dear friends, dear audience, as it was marked in discussions at the Tallinn Digital Summit, we need to start future-proofing our society. That starts also with providing our workforce the necessary skills to succeed in a highly digital workplace. As we agreed at the Tallinn Digital Summit, digital skills are the new literacy. Therefore, I really like that in a social pillar we are ready to sign together just in a few moments. The very first principle emphasizes the role of education, training and also skills. There can be no losers in the digital economy, only winners. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, also for introducing magnificent changes that are underway, whether it's around AI or robotics and IoT, and really saying that our workforce needs to be prepared for these changes that are to come, because as long as we primarily teach skills that are very easy to test, those will be the first jobs that are going to be going, because they are the easiest to be automated. So thank you so much, a very valuable contribution. Now let's turn to the social partners. Yesterday, the social partners issued an important joint statement on the occasion of this summit, and I want to applaud you for that, commend you for that. I think it's a very, very strong signal, and we now greatly look forward to hearing your respective perspectives on this statement. Now, let me first call on Luca Visentini, President of the European Trade Union Confederation, who will give the perspective of the employees' organizations. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Does it work? Yeah. And thank you very much, first of all, to Stefan Löfven and President Jean-Claude Juncker for having organized this important summit after 20 years, as Jean-Claude said. When our union was funded and then enlarged to new member states, the social market economy and the European social model were fundamental values, while upward convergence, integration and cohesion were promised to people. The austerity policies we have faced so far have led to slow recovery and yet insufficient improvements in unemployment levels and employment rates, but no significant convergence, integration and cohesion has taken place. On the contrary, countries and regions are still lagging behind, youngsters and older workers struggle to find and retain a job, labour markets are fragmented and a large number of the new jobs created are precarious, outsiders don't enjoy the same level of protection as insiders, while insiders are at risk of losing their rights. Inequalities in the EU reached the level of the US. Wages were depressed together with productivity in the last decade, and wage gaps and divergences between countries and sectors are unacceptably high and thus undermining the potential of the single market. The responsibility of all of us is to provide people with convincing and concrete solutions to the problems in their daily lives. Active labour market policies for youth, long-term unemployed and disadvantaged people, as investment in skills and competences, while ensuring equal treatment and decent conditions of work and life, accompanying workers in facing the challenges deriving from globalization, digitalization and climate change. All this should be at the core of our new European social policy. This is what the European Pillar of Social Rights is about. It's about reaffirming rights and protections that were neglected for years. It's about making sure that they are implemented and reinforced in practice. It's about making sure that the social dimension is not a compensation for those left behind, but has the same level of importance of economic freedoms. That's why we are convinced that the social pillar will not deliver if it's not framed in the economic governance in the European semester and if it's not supported by a stronger EU budget, as President Tajani just said. That's why we are convinced also that the proclamation of the pillar must be followed by an action plan for implementation made of legislation and concrete initiatives. I want to tell you that the European workers are very grateful to President Juncker for having launched the social pillar, and to you, Prime Ministers and heads of state, for being committed to proclaim it today. It's an historic moment for Europe that all of us will remember. So please, don't dissipate this potential by discussing the usual old questions. If we need more Europe or more member states, more integration or more subsidiarity, more or less regulation. This is the time for unity and solidarity. This is the time to build up the future of Europe, a future that must be prosperous and social. We trust you will be ambitious and determined in doing that. Be sure that trade unions with all social partners will be on your side to deliver. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Luca. I think this is a very important contribution, essentially a wake-up call that not all is well in Europe, despite the nice pickup in growth and the high employment rate. So hopefully one area for discussion today is really how we can get greater upward convergence, because sometimes there is still too much divergence between our countries, and also how to embed the social pillar in the economic governance, as you say. So thank you so much for raising these very important points. Now, Emma Marcegaglia, President of Business Europe, you will share with us the views from the business community, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Dear President, dear Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen, the main message that Business Europe want to convey to this important social summit is that Europe is, and if it can remain, one of the best places in the world to live, work and do business, we have to do the necessary reforms. We don't have to forget this. We prepared a fact sheet that has been distributed to you, showing our track record on the social front. And you can see from that that Europeans rank very high in global comparison on all the different voices. So I think that the European Union has been instrumental in making the European way of life what it is today. And I think we should be more outspoken on this and recognize that this is very important. But at the same time, we must be very clear on the need to address the challenges that are facing us. The recovery is getting stronger, but the window of opportunity should be used to make the necessary reforms. I want to underline very clearly that economic and social pillars, economic and social challenges must be addressed in a coherent way and must go together, recognizing that economic progress is the basis for social well-being. Companies have a central role to play. Their ability to deliver growth and jobs depends on a broad policy mix. We think that we have to enhance our single markets, we have to work on our industrial policy, embracing this digitalization, we have to pursue a very strong and open EU trade policies, and we have to strengthen our economic and monetary union. Social policies are very important. We think that also from the employer's point of view, we are very proud of our social values that are part of our European DNA. However, to defend them, we must modernize our social model. And to be able to finance social safety nets, we must be competitive. I want to tell you, we all know that we don't have to forget that our model of social market economy is subject to global competition. It is a tough global competition. We have to compete with very different approaches like the one in China, in India, in Russia. So we have always to take to comprehend what is going on in the global scenario. So we have to be competitive. We must do better in terms of growth, employment and productivity. And for that, we need to have less rigidities in the labor law, reduce excessive non-wage labor costs, address skill mismatches, which is key, and remove unemployment traps. The European Pillar of Social Rights rightly recognizes that the main responsibility of the delivery of its principles lies in the hands of the member states, and that the autonomy of the social partners has to be respected. To be effective, labour market and social policy decisions should be taken as closest as possible to the employers and to the employee and citizens. The EU should avoid further heavy-handed legislative intervention, because this should be detrimental to the capacity to create new jobs. What will happen to the revision of the written statement directive will be important. We are disappointed by the E2C decision not to negotiate. This directive, we think, deals with issues at the heart of social partners' competence, but we are here. Social partners is always finding compromises, and for our side the door is open and we are ready to start again to negotiate. So to conclude on a broader and brighter note, we are very happy that we reached this joint statement with the unions. We are committed to work for a best Europe, and doing so we think we really help and we do what we have to do for the next generation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Emma, also for a timely reminder that, of course, so much of our social policy ultimately depends on economic progress and economic performance, because the companies have to compete with companies elsewhere, China and other parts of the world, where the social standards are much lower. So, I mean, I think that that's a very important perspective. Thank you for that. And finally, to conclude this session, we asked a very special person to contribute her thoughts. It's a great pleasure now to give the floor to Daya Isaksson, who has a very, very interesting title. She's a member of the Swedish Prime Minister's National Innovation Council and a member of the government's Digital Advisory Board. Over to you, Daya.
Thank you. So, this important summit takes place at a time where we are at a crossroads. Our cities are growing. Flows of people, goods, information and ideas is also growing rapidly, and with that, the economic, ecological and social impact of those flows. And how we handle this, it means that we understand we need to transform our cities, transform our welfare institutions, our supply chains, our consumption patterns into something sustainable. And how we handle this early, critical stage of that transformation will impact not only our lives, but the lives of hundreds of millions of people. It's a great challenge, but it's a challenge that comes at a time where we have created unique opportunities for ourselves. For instance, the opportunities we now have to organize all kinds of resources, be it material, vehicles, people, more efficiently than ever before. And we have seen how this has transformed media and retail, and now it's beginning to transform utilities, finance, education, healthcare, the entire workforce. For instance, Google recently launched an initiative called Google Job Search, which aims at indexing every single job post in the world, including information about what skills are required and what the salaries are, and then applying the world-leading artificial intelligence and matching that into our mobile phones. That will drive transparency in the work market. That will drive mobility in a millennial workforce that's already globalized in their minds. We can also automatically assign jobs. We call it the gig economy, and we worry, what about workers' rights? What about social insurances? Those are valid and important questions, so long as we remember that a job is not necessarily unfair and bad because it's distributed through a digital platform. It just needs a work market to be organized somewhat differently. And then we also have automation, no longer an issue for industry only, but lawyers, doctors, teachers, economists, journalists all face increasing automation, and many of them worry about a jobless future. But let's just step a bit back and remember the industrialization of the 19th century, how previously manual jobs in the textile industry were automated. All those jobs were lost, all of them. But still, and the total amount of jobs kept growing for 200 years, as long as demand kept growing. So before those jobs were lost, there was no retail as we know it, no marketing jobs, no supply chain specialists, no customer care agents. We have benefited enormously from that automation in health, wealth and well-being. And we should ask ourselves, what demand will keep growing in the next 100 years? What demand can we stimulate that will help us transform into a sustainable society? What about health? What about human connectivity to help us build emotional resilience to change rather than to just stress and be depressed and get cardiovascular disease? Now, much of that demand will require this new raw material, data, that needs to be interoperable and accessible to innovation. This time too will create new jobs, simply because value is in fact a social creation. We keep inventing things that we value. And also, the professions that we know, most of them will not disappear, but they will change. What changes are the tools that you use, what processes you apply, which leads us to the most important issue here, that differences are now increasing. Differences between the individuals, organizations, and countries that have the ability to take these new opportunities and turn it into innovation, increased productivity, better quality for citizens and customers, and those individuals, organizations, and countries that don't have that. That's why we need to look at ourselves and realize that talking about lifelong learning is not talking to a generation of youngsters. We need to learn. People born in the 50s, 60s, 70s and 80s, we should be training every week. How do we incentivize individuals in organizations and higher education to make this training happen every week? Well, for that, we now have a fantastic opportunity. We have this new digital dimension that allows us to share knowledge and get access to each other everywhere, anytime, with the speed of light. That is an opportunity to scale human knowledge in an order of magnitude far beyond what the printing press could do. We can do that. We should do that. So I'm very happy to see you EU leaders here to discuss how we can distribute opportunity fairly, and may I then add, as abundantly as only a digital world will allow.
Thank you. Thank you so much.